Hi everybody, welcome back to English 221 Shakespeare, and this is for our class for Wednesday the 27th of January. And I'm hopeful you were able to watch the class video from the last class, where basically I just reviewed the syllabus and the course outline to give you a little bit of an idea of what the class is about. And we really aren't starting until next week because I wanted individuals to have finished any adding and dropping they might be doing, and also to get their text. So I had indicated that you can use basically any edition of Shakespeare that I recommend has some footnotes associated with it because the footnotes will assist you. I like the Riverside Shakespeare, but there are lots of editions that are out there. You can do Signet and Penguin, for instance, rather inexpensively as paperback versions, especially if you get them used. And there are also online versions as well, and I'll be sharing some of those links with you too. But you'll notice that today there was no reading, and that's done purposely, as well as on Monday there's no reading either, because I wanted to give you a little bit of background about Shakespeare himself and also a little bit of background about the Shakespearean stage. And in terms of my reviewing the syllabus last class, the one piece that I did not review was about plagiarism, which is basically taking somebody else's language or ideas and not acknowledging the source. And it's a pretty serious academic offense. It's comparable to stealing. And if you were to get caught engaged in this offense, you could basically not only just fail the assignment, but you could actually be expelled from college with a notation on your transcript indicating that you plagiarized. And I always tell two stories to try to encourage people not to plagiarize. And both of these occurred pre-internet. One occurred to me in the early days of my career, where I was reading a paper that sounded very familiar, which is not that unusual because professors are usually pretty well read. But it didn't take me long to identify where the passages that I recognized came from. They came from our very own class textbook that I had assigned for the course. And for some reason, the student thought that I wouldn't recognize it. And there were a few errors in terms of the recopying. I don't know if they were done deliberately in order to try to fool me, or this person was just sloppy. But the better story occurred around the same time, and prior to the internet, and it happened to a middle-aged professor. And this part is important. And this was in all of the academic newspapers at the time. There are such things as academic newspapers. And this professor, too, was reading a set of papers and realized that one paper sounded familiar. And he needed to rely on his memory rather than on a website search engine. And as many websites as there are that can assist students in terms of plagiarizing, there are a comparable number of websites probably to help teachers determine if students are engaged in plagiarism. One of my favorites is called Turnitin.com, where I could type in a sentence or a paragraph and do a search, an electronic search, but obviously this professor didn't have that option. But as he continued to read the paper and began puzzling over it, where he'd seen this before, where he'd see this before, he realized he hadn't read it. He actually himself had written it decades earlier when he was an undergraduate student. And it had something to do with, as an undergraduate, he had belonged to a fraternity that was recycling papers, and somehow, some way, decades later, one of his own students got a hold of one of those papers. And not only did the student get caught for plagiarizing, but the student also was part of a media spectacle, because I know that the likelihood of such a thing happening is pretty darn rare. And I always share those two stories to try to encourage you not to plagiarize. And I think in terms of the way the class is structured, you'll remember that the assignments that you have are informal journal writings in which you share your own thoughts and questions, and that the papers that we've got too over the course of the semester are critical papers. In other words, you don't need to use outside research. You can rely on your own knowledge and understanding. Though that said, if you really wanted to write a research paper, come talk with me and we could discuss what your options are. But I always share this plagiarism story in all of my classes, so to encourage you, if you are at all tempted to plagiarize, it really isn't worth the risk. Especially because you get to rewrite the first paper in this class, definitely, and perhaps, depending on when you hand in the second paper, you would have that option with paper number 2. So that was the last piece of the syllabus that I didn't get to. But what I wanted to do today was to have you watch a documentary that's approximately an hour long or so, and it's what I would have shown in class if we were meeting as a class. And it talks a little bit about Shakespeare and his background and also some theories about could it be possible that Shakespeare did not write his plays, and could somebody else have been responsible? Now, I have my own feelings on the subject, which I will share with you next class, so I'm going to leave you in suspense in terms of that. But I would like you to watch that particular documentary, and it's entitled William Shakespeare the Bard, and I've included the link for that. You can see that in the notes posted below. And you can see that this will be today's attendance question. That your attendance question is due 24 hours after which our class would normally meet. So we would normally meet on Monday or Wednesday at 8 a.m. So this would mean that if this class is supposed to substitute for our Wednesday class, your attendance question would be due Thursday, and that would be the 28th, and that would be at 8 a.m. However, again, if you need an extension, just let me know. And the question is, do you think Shakespeare was the author of the works attributed to him? And why or why not? So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on the matter. And as I said, I'll share my thoughts with you next class. So I'll leave this at this point because the rest of the class is basically viewing the documentary. I hope you're all doing well. I'm doing well. And on Monday of next week, we'll talk a little bit more about Shakespeare and his theater and some of the upcoming assignments as well. Take care. Bye-bye.